Morning, folks. You're very welcome to today's CSR webinar. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Wendy Beattie. I'm the chair of the safety group at the moment. A warm welcome to Jonathan Caughey, who is our speaker for today. He's Federation Manager at CEF. So all that's left for me to do now is hand over to Jonathan and welcome him to the meeting this morning. Thanks again, Jonathan, for agreeing to do this for us.
No problem.
And I'll let you. I'll turn my mic and camera off now that you're joined in, and let's see that get the presentation up and going. I'm sure we'll chat to you then again. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just share my screen here. Bear with me 1 second.
Good stuff. That's it now. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. Hello, everybody, and thanks to Ernie, Nicola and Wendy at the Northern Ireland Safety Group for inviting me along to talk about the Construction Skills Register today. My name is Jonathan Caughey. I am currently Federation Manager at the Construction Employers Federation, which is the certified representative body for the construction industry in Northern Ireland. I started at CEF back in 2005 as a graduate trainee, and I think I probably weighed about 7 stone at that stage and had a full head of hair, so I think that probably tells you all you need to know, really. My role involves managing both CSR that we're here to talk about today and also Safety Cert, which is a third-party health and safety management system, and I also facilitate our health and safety committee, amongst other things. So as I say, thanks very much for coming along, and hopefully leave with a better understanding of the changes that are ongoing with CSR. So I thought I would start with a quick summary of the running order, just so you know what to expect. So I'm going to start by spending a little bit of time highlighting the Building Mental Health Alliance and the introduction of mental health as a topic covered by CSR. I'll then set the context with a bit of information about CSR and where it's come from, and that includes some information on mutual recognition, which I know is a hot topic. I'll explain the reasons for the changes that are being introduced to CSR. I'll run through a timeline of those main changes. I'll highlight some of the guidance that has been produced to assist the industry, and then I'll finish with some of our upcoming plans, and then you have the opportunity to grill me at the end, but please don't. That'd be great. Okay, so as I say, I'll start with the Building Mental Health Alliance. It's always good to start the presentation with a positive. So what is the Building Mental Health Alliance and what's it all about? So it was launched in October last year on World Mental Health Day. And really it's all about collaboration. It's a collaboration of industry bodies, large contractors and other workplace health and safety organisations. Namely, I'll give them a name check. So there's CEF, CITB, FFB, the Mineral Products Association, Northern Ireland Construction Group, Build Health, Graham, Farrens, McLaughlin Harvey, Henry Brothers, and of course then obviously the Northern Ireland Safety Group. So the Alliance works together with the aim to create better mental health awareness, support and training for everyone working within the Northern Ireland built environment sector. And really it was formed, I suppose, because there was a recognition that mental health in the Northern Ireland construction industry had to be addressed. We've all seen the statistics, they're pretty horrendous, to be honest, and it's obviously a big issue. And the Alliance, you know, we're not experts, but we can use the reach of and the influence of the various stakeholders to, I suppose the aim really is to reduce stigma around mental health. So going back to collaboration, I suppose information sharing will be key going forward. We've established relationships with 11 local charities and organisations that can offer guidance and direct help. And really the focus of the Alliance is to be the focal point for that information and guidance. There has already been some initial outputs, the first of which was an awareness video that was created by CITB, and that demonstrates to construction workers the importance of looking out for their colleagues, and also that support exists for those experiencing mental ill health. If you haven't seen it, I really strongly advise you to check it out. It's really fantastic resource, and I suppose it has local actors in it. So I think we often see kind of English videos and things, but this is a real great local resource. So certainly check that out. There's also a toolbox talk that has been produced that can be delivered on site, and again aims to raise awareness of the issues that could be impacting those working on site and how they can get help. There's the CSR mental health module. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. But generally, I suppose there's much more to come from the Building Mental Health Alliance, and I think in the very near future also. So I'm sure Northern Ireland Safety Group and the other stakeholders will keep everyone posted. So really watch this space. So the CSR mental health module. So obviously, selfishly, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in more detail. So basically, the Alliance was looking for easy wins initially when it was set up, and CSR ticked all the boxes here, really. It's a great way to get basic info to a lot of people. It's a very basic overview, but again, by talking about mental health, it helps breaking down the stigma. It's initially been included in the operatives, the CSR operatives course, and that was really because that's aimed at the largest number of candidates. And you know, it's brilliant to say that since it was launched in sort of October, November last year, over 10,000 candidates have received training on mental health in the construction industry. So that is something I think we should be proud of. I am going to take you through the learning outcomes, but generally the sort of the module, it highlights the signs of mental ill health to look out for and signpost candidates to some of the organisations and charities that can provide help and advice locally. We have had the content checked by mental health professionals from Inspire Wellbeing. You know, we're not, as I say, mental health specialists by any stretch of the imagination. So we involved Inspire, and we also got training for any of the CSR trainers that wanted it, because obviously they'll be delivering it, and we wanted them to feel confident doing that. Can be a difficult subject to talk about, and so they also, part of the training, it was what to do if someone attending a course made some sort of declaration that they were suffering from mental health. We do plan to roll it out to other levels of training. There's that saying, fit your own oxygen mask first. So those with more responsibility, they obviously have to look after themselves, but there will be a different focus to that, the training at the higher levels, because they have the duty of care to their employees. So I don't plan on delivering the training today. I'm not a trainer, and it would do a disservice to the trainers who are qualified to deliver it. I'm just going to take a quick run through the slides and talk through the trainer notes that are provided to trainers. And the reason we do that is to ensure consistency, so it's delivered in the same way across the network. So the mental health section of the CSR course, it's designed to be sort of 5-10 minutes. As I say, it's a basic overview. It's the first topic on the one-day course, and that's really to highlight the importance and catch people's attention at the start. Each module of the course begins with learning outcomes, and you can see from the slide here, the mental health module, it's very much sort of mental health 101. So I'll just skip on through the slides. So the first slide really is about what is mental health, and the trainers are encouraged to ask the question at the start, what is mental health, just to kind of get a bit of discussion going with the class. There's the NHS definition there in bold. The trainers then kind of talk through, and they're talking about how modern life is difficult and it has several competing demands. According to the Workplace Health Leadership Group, NI, there's an estimated 16,000 employees in Northern Ireland each year that are affected by stress, depression, and anxiety, obviously a huge number there. There's also a recent study that's found that those in the construction industry were 3 times more likely to take their own lives than those in other sectors, which is just a horrendous statistic, really. And there's lots of contributing factors that have been found in relation to this. You know, there's long demand working hours, working away from home a lot. There can be relationship, family issues, financial worries, and I suppose these just show that it can originate from both work and outside work. The tough guy culture in construction also prevents many from speaking out and talking about the issues they may be having. But the positive thing is that attitudes are changing. Mental health, it definitely is becoming more spoken about, and stigma is reducing. But overall, sort of the message is that to remember that it's okay not to be okay. Moving on then, so just like any illness, it's important to be able to identify the key symptoms of mental health in yourself and your colleagues. So what the trainer does with this slide, they just kind of run through the symptoms listed on the slide. You can see them there. I won't do that today, but they focus really on looking out for workers and how it's important. And whilst it can be embarrassing to kind of raise the issue, to remember that it could really make a difference to somebody's well-being. And if you are planning to help someone who's showing signs of mental health, there's a couple of bullet points the trainer talks through. So find an appropriate place to talk, encourage them to talk, listen to them, obviously, reassure them, and then encourage them to seek support. There is a growing number of mental health first aiders on sites across the industry, but obviously GPs or some of the charities and stuff are there to help also. This slide, really the attendees are just encouraged to read through the slide here and the various different headings and columns, and try and think about where they believe they currently fit into. I think I might be struggling a wee bit at the minute, to be honest, but but we don't obviously ask for a response from the attendees, but it's just to get the attendees thinking about their own mind and recognise that there are different levels across that spectrum. Okay, so obviously it's really important to give guidance on managing your mental health, and so like with any illness, obviously there's ways of managing your mental health, and the trainer again runs through each of the headings there and goes into a bit more detail. Example, keeping active, exercise can boost self-esteem and help concentration. It can also help your sleep and your mood, and keep you fit and healthy and improve your mental health. And obviously things like ask for health and drinking sensibly, all, I suppose, basic stuff that we probably know, but it's important just to reinforce those messages. And then I suppose probably the most important slide, I think, really is this one. And so, just like any physical illness, it's important to seek help if you are struggling mentally. If you break your leg, you don't just hope that it fixes itself or expect it to get better. So attendees are encouraged, if they are struggling, to speak to their GP, but there's also the other organisations listed in the slide. There's the construction industry helpline, Lighthouse, Samaritans, Lifeline also have a helpline, aren't listed there at the minute. Aware NI, Action Mental Health. There's lots of both national and local charities that have and provide help and assistance. So then basically the trainers, each module is sort of finished off with a recap of the learning outcomes at the end of each module. So that is really just a sort of whistle-stop tour of the CSR mental health module, but hopefully you agree that whilst it is basic, it's great to have mental health mentioned to so many construction workers, and I'm sure Northern Ireland Safety Group will keep you updated on the progress of the Building Mental Health Alliance also. Okay, so I suppose I'm going to move on now to the kind of main part of the presentation and what you've all really come to hear about. And that's the changes to CSR. As I said at the start, I just want to maybe start with a bit of setting some context. So CSR is the card scheme for the construction industry in Northern Ireland. It's used where there's buildings, civil engineering, maintenance, workshops. It's probably fanned out a little bit wider than traditional construction sort of over the years. It was launched way back in 1997. So over 25 years old now. It's owned by the Joint Council. That's made up of both employer and employee representatives. So the employer representatives are appointed by CEF and employee reps are appointed by trade unions. Company called Construction Federation Services, CFS Limited, administers the scheme on behalf of Joint Council. We have a small team here at 143, and I suppose really CFS is responsible for the production and issuing of cards and all that's associated with that. So CSR covers roles in the industry from apprentice right up to sort of senior director and all that's in between there. There's obviously involves health and safety training, and so there's different levels of health and safety training in CSR. There's the operative course, the supervisor course, manager and senior manager. Historically, it accompanied sort of with an assessment of skills, but that's moving towards qualifications, and I can cover that up more a bit later in the presentation. CSR has really been driven, I suppose, by the requirement. It was included as a requirement in the Build CEF NI initiative, and so that Build CEF NI was a coming together of employers, employees, government and various other sort of stakeholders, and the aim of that was to reduce injuries and fatalities in the construction industry in Northern Ireland. And as part of that, CSR or equivalent is a requirement in public sector construction contracts. You know, I certainly don't want to take credit for the reduction in fatalities over the years, but if you think back to 2003 when Build CEF was launched, I think the industry as a whole has, you know, there's been a massive improvement in that area, although obviously any death is one too many. I want to be clear from the start, you know, CSR isn't a legal requirement, but it is seen, I suppose, probably now as kind of best practice and as a kind of almost a passport to employment in the construction industry. It's not often you see a job advert that doesn't ask for some sort of CSR equivalent type card. I've included this slide because I have a feeling that there might be some training providers in the audience, and so I thought I should take the opportunity to big them up for the great job that they do. So there's 27 training organisations or training providers as we call them, and they are accredited by CFS. They are based all across Northern Ireland to give easy access to candidates across the province. They're required to comply with a service level agreement, and that outlines the requirements they must meet. And that, you know, there's lots of stuff in there, but all sort of in and around the venue, the trainer, all the admin requirements that they have to meet. And they also have to have ISO 9001 for the CSR admin processes. And all of this is really geared towards ensuring consistency across the network, so that if you send someone on a course in Belfast, it's the same as they get the same experiences if they go to Derry or Fermanagh or the North Coast, anywhere sort of thing. We do kind of back up the quality by having regular admin audits, service delivery monitoring visits where we actually go out and observe the training. We check monthly on the card applications to ensure they're coming in a timely manner. We also regularly survey employers that have recently received training just to ensure that we continue to provide a high level of service. There's currently about, I suppose, I think it's about 80,000 active cards at any one time. There obviously was a bit of a dip throughout COVID, but last year the kind of card levels returned to the sort of pre-COVID levels. So I've included this slide mainly because Nicola had suggested that it would be quite a hot topic, but I do mention recognition also because it's important. Because the Northern Ireland construction industry, as you all know, you know, exports an awful lot of labour to neighbouring jurisdictions, the airports, you know, on a Sunday evening or evidence of that, and also, you know, all around Dublin, hoardings and things like that. But it's also important in the context of why the changes are being introduced, and I'm going to cover that off in the next slide. But so CSR is one of 38 schemes across the UK, and those schemes are all members of the CSCS Alliance. And in effect, that means that are all accepted across the UK. So CSR cards are accepted in GB. It's CSR's also the only training that's accepted as equivalent to Safe Pass in the Republic. I want to be clear here that relates specifically to the one-day course for operatives So basically, if Safe Pass is required on a site down south, your CSR card will be accepted if you completed the one-day CSR course for operatives. And how you would know that is on the back of the card. It says accredited safety training. We have liaised with Solus to provide a list of all the accepted cards, and they have provided them to their accredited training organisations. So I think it's becoming fairly widely accepted. And what I do say is, if you're ever having issues with acceptance, do reach out to the team at CSR. We time to time get calls, and we can direct them to various websites and stuff that confirms that CSR is accepted. So all fairly straightforward in relation to recognition so far, right? But yeah, it starts to get a little bit complicated because down south they have a card scheme also called CSCS, but confusingly it's not related in any way to the GB CSCS scheme. And so where this comes from, so in Schedule 5 of the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Construction Regulations 2013, that includes a list of prescribed occupations that require specific training. And it includes plant, scaffolding, roofing, sign lighting and guarding. That's not exhaustive, but they're the kind of main ones, I suppose. And I think one of the key things, it's really clearly noted on the Solus webpage that anyone working in one of these occupations is legally required to hold a Solus CSCS registration card. Whereas there's the mutual recognition is allowed for in the legislation in relation to the health and safety training. In relation to these areas, it's not. It has to be a Solus CSCS registration card. So therefore, CSR cards, for example, plant, aren't accepted in the Republic in these prescribed occupations. There was previously a workaround under it was an EU directive on temporary recognition of qualifications, and so basically if you had an MVQ level 2, that would have been accepted on a rolling temporary basis. But Brexit has changed that. There still is a mechanism to submit information on qualifications and things to Solus, but what I'm hearing from the ground is that that response from Solus is usually that there's further training required, and that takes place at their facility in Mount Lucas in Offaly. There's nothing really we can do. We've made representations a number of times over the years going up to the North-South Ministerial Council, but that's the way it is at the minute. Solus are changing their the CSCS, the training and stuff involved, but I suppose that's Solus' baby, so I'm not really going to talk. I think it hasn't been fully announced and things yet, but that may open the window for some form of maybe not full recognition, but may reduce the training, the additional training that will be required. And obviously, if there are any changes in relation to that, we'll let the industry know. But I suppose just to finish off on recognition before I move on, I think CSR actually is in a fairly unique position in that the majority of our cards, and I do say the majority, it's not all of them, but the majority of cards are accepted across the entire UK and Ireland, and that's not the case for some of the other, like Safe Pass and CSCS and things like that. So definitely a positive. So what I'm going to do now on this slide really is try and provide some clarity of why the decision to implement the changes was taken. And I often get sort of the impression when I speak to people on the phone that I personally dreamt up these changes. And I just want to assure you, for the record, Your Honour, that it wasn't me. That's not the case. Where it comes from really would go back right to 2015. And so the Construction Leadership Council, that's a body made up of representatives of the English and Welsh construction industry and also the UK government. They announced their one industry logo requirements, and that came as an action from the Industrial Strategy Construction 2025. The aim here really was to have the industry in England and Wales, and that includes trade associations, contractors, clients and government specifying and promoting card schemes that carry the CSCS logo for all public projects with no equivalents accepted. And I suppose the objective they list for this was to provide clients, employers and contractors with a consistent means of recognising that an individual has achieved the agreed qualification in the occupation they're working in, and give industry confidence in a single brand. I think what they were finding in the UK, or GB, sorry, that there was so many card schemes that it was becoming very difficult for people to understand what would be accepted and what couldn't be. So the CSCS logo was one way of kind of saying the schemes that have that have met the standard. So obviously that's England and Wales, and where does CSR come into this? So we as a scheme have always had the CSCS logo on our card. We were an original CSCS affiliate going back probably the majority of those 25 years that CSR has existed. But for the reasons mentioned in the previous slide on kind of recognition and affordability of the workforce, so the Joint Council, again the owner of the scheme, employers and employees, decided that CSR needed to comply with the requirements to ensure that the CSCS logo remained on CSR cards and continued to be accepted in GB. Failure to do that would have meant anyone with a CSR card would not have been able to access sites in GB. So that's kind of the main reason behind why these changes are coming in. The Construction Leadership Council, as part of this one industry logo, and to maintain the CSR logo, or sorry, CSCS logo on our cards, they set down a number of minimum requirements that all 38 schemes have to meet. The schemes are audited against those on an annual basis, just to make sure they continue to comply. And in the last month or so, CSR has underwent the annual audit and received confirmation that we continue to comply with those requirements. But as part of the recent audit, I thought it was worthwhile mentioning, you know, I did mention as part of the audit that there was significant kickback from industry. The auditor did acknowledge that this probably, you know, it's not just us. Obviously, there's significant kickback across the other schemes, but ultimately the CLC have made their mind up and are not going to change their mind. So there's not the kind of last minute out that I think some people have been maybe hoping for. And then just to finish on this slide, really, I suppose the impact of both Grenfell and the Hackett report, that has really sort of shone a light on confidence, and it's likely that schemes will have to continue to change to meet the ever-changing needs of both government and industry. And you know, that might involve things like evidence of ongoing CPD. So I think whilst these are major changes for the industry, I think it's probably the start, and there will be further changes coming up in the years to come. So this is the first of 3 slides on the changes. So I'm not going to go through each point in detail, but I suppose the point of the slide here is that to highlight that the changes started as early as 2016, and industry and the training providers were made aware of the changes as part of a 3-year plan to 2020 way back in 2017. So the changes aren't new; they've been, been ongoing for a good few years now. And then I think maybe one last point to make on this slide is you can see that the first change there was the introduction of AQP and PQP cards, so academically qualified and professionally qualified persons cards. These were introduced as an alternative to manager and senior manager cards for those with construction degrees or membership of professional bodies. But it's only really relatively recently that candidates have started to apply for these cards in any sort of numbers. So it's just really to highlight that change can be a slow burner. They have been available for six years now almost type thing, and they're only really now starting to gain a foothold. So some more changes then. I suppose the first big one really, and that was in the move towards qualifications, was the removal of occupational assessments for managers and senior managers back in April 2018. And so that meant those applying for a new manager or senior manager card were required to have a level 6 or level 7 NVQ respectively from that point onwards. But as you'll see from the presentation throughout, we're always keen to introduce other options. We don't want to prevent people from getting cards. So I've previously highlighted the AQP and PQP cards. We've also introduced an Experience Manager card. And so what that entails is that if you don't have a qualification, but if you've signed up for the NVQ but haven't completed it, when your card comes to renewal, you can get this card. And so basically the candidate continues to be carded. They still have a card. It recognises their experience and also that they're working towards a qualification. It also really buys them some time, and I suppose I think these cards will become more used the closer we get to the deadline at the end of next year. Important to note though that those experience cards are a one-time only card. They can't be renewed, and so the qualification has to be achieved for you to progress to the card the next time based on the qualification. So more changes. This is the third slide then on the changes that have been introduced. So I suppose they really started to pick up pace in April 2019. You may be aware of the kind of long existing GCO, General Construction Operative card, that was withdrawn and replaced with a labourer card in April 19, and that was to meet one of the construction leadership requirements. And so what it said was that it identified certain cards, including new entrants, apprentices, trainees, labourers, or workers in the process of obtaining a formal qualification. They had to be clearly and easily identifiable. So we changed it from GCO to labourer. We also at Joint Council at this time decided to introduce a health and safety trained card. This is quite significant, I suppose, because it doesn't meet the CLC requirements and it doesn't have the CSCS logo on it. So it's important to note that the health and safety trained card won't be accepted in GB, but where it's coming from is, so the GCO card had become a bit of a kind of catch-all. It's also issued to plumbers and electricians who didn't fall under the remit of Joint Council, but had agreed that health and safety training was necessary in order to comply with the Build Safe NI initiative. So the health and safety training card, it remains acceptable in, obviously it's accepted in Northern Ireland, and it's really, what you do is do the one-day health and safety, so it's record of basic health and safety training. It's also accepted in the South as equivalent to Safe Pass based on the mutual recognition that I talked about a few slides ago. So, you know, that's recognition that there are people who work in Northern Ireland, and the kind of driver is that you have to have health and safety to work on health and safety training, to work on public sector contracts. So there's always an option for someone to have a card, and that would be that if they're working in Northern Ireland, there would be the health and safety training card. Moving on then, there was kind of two, maybe call them watershed moments really, and they followed in quick succession. There was the removal of all remaining occupational assessments. So basically anyone from that stage, new cards would have to be issued on the basis of qualification. And then the biggest announcement was about MBQs for all skill cards from the end of 2024. I'm going to cover that off now in more detail just in the next slide. So again, I go back to the Construction Leadership Council and their requirements. So that the CSCS logo remained on the card, so it remained portable across GB. So two CLC requirements are important in relation to this change. The first is that the minimum standard for skilled occupations is an NVQ level 2 qualification, and that's relevant to the occupation that the person is working in, plus a separate health and safety element, and that obviously would be the training. And then the second CLC requirement is that a transition process to bring all existing card holders up to the minimum standard by 2020 will be agreed and implemented. And so that last one, that was interpreted then as the plan had to be in place by 2020, and that's why in December 19, it was announced that all skilled cards previously issued on the basis of occupational assessment and industry accreditation from the 1st of January 2020 would expire at the end of 2024. And that did give the industry a fairly significant period of time to transition. And worthwhile mentioning at this stage too that the other changes that I've run through on those last 3 slides, they weren't introduced just at the drop of a hat. There was obviously lead in time that industry was told about them. So the result of this change, the cards really impacted our skilled cards, craft cards, supervisor cards, manager cards, and senior manager cards. The positive is that if you have a relevant qualification, there's no difference. Your card just continues for 4 years for the date that the health and safety training has been completed. If you don't have a relevant qualification when you come to renew, then the card expires on the 31st of December 2024. So when that was introduced back in December 2019, people were still getting 4 years pretty much as a validity period on their card, but that obviously, as we approach the deadline, has reduced down and is about 18 months at the minute. One kind of key thing really to mention here is that it doesn't impact labourer cards. They are still issued on the basis of completion of the 1-day health and safety and a declaration that they've been working as a labourer. It's important, I suppose, really, because labourer cards are traditionally the kind of biggest category of card that is issued. And then I suppose I'll finish off this slide by kind of hammering home that there are a range of qualifications accepted that are equivalent to NVQ. It talks about NVQ requirements a lot and people get fixated on that, but there are lots of equivalents and alternatives accepted. So you can see from the slide there's City and Guilds Craft and Advanced Craft, or the certificates are accepted, and I suppose that's great for, and I use this word reticently, older card holders will probably benefit from this, given that those City and Guilds qualifications preceded NVQs. We also accept apprenticeships, and then higher level cards I've already mentioned. We accept degrees, HNDs, HNCs, and professional memberships of professional bodies like ICE and CIOB and things like that. There's also a route for overseas qualifications. So there's a process in place. You can contact an organisation called ICTIS, used to be called UK NARIC, and they look at the qualification and determine whether it is, what it would be equivalent to on the UK framework of qualifications, and if there's a statement of comparability saying that it meets the same, it's equivalent to an NVQ or a degree or whatever, then we can issue the card based on that. We had taken a fairly decent step forward back in March there in providing guidance for the industry. And we updated our website. It has now a specific section on industry accreditation and how to move off these cards based on a relevant qualification. The info was produced by a national task force, including CITB, CSCS, the awarding organisations that do the NVQ qualifications. We got that, and then, as usual, had to Northern Irelandise it, as I say, and make it a bit more specific to Northern Ireland. So we did that. It has lots of flow charts that highlight kind of all the options, and that they are broken down into blue card, gold card, platinum card, and black card on how you can the various alternatives and what you have to do. And I suppose the key messages really. Before we move on to the key messages, there's an FAQ section on the website as well, and lots more information about qualifications and grants from CITB, that sort of stuff. And it has been really well received. Feedback on the phones has been very positive. That it's fairly straightforward, and gives a place that people can look for that information. But what I would also say is that if you need more information or you have a qualification that you're not sure about, lift the phone and speak to the team. We're here, we're ready to help, and we want to help. And we are actively looking at qualifications to see, can we accept them? Don't just think that it won't be accepted. Do get in touch, and we'll try and work out if we can accept it. So you can see there from the slide, the main messages really that come across in that guidance is that, first off, obviously a candidate should check to see if they have an NVQ applicable to their current occupation. I joke at the minute that there's an awful lot of hoping in attics going on. There are definitely lots of qualifications that people maybe did a number of years ago and filed away, not used, or they didn't even really realise that they've got it, and when they have a look, they realise that they have actually achieved an NVQ as part of a course at college or whatever. Again, the alternative qualifications, City and Guilds, craft and advanced craft certificates, overseas qualifications, construction-related degrees and professional qualifications, apprenticeships, all the stuff I've talked about before. So if the candidate doesn't have one of those accepted qualifications, they will have to register and complete an NVQ if they wish to have the card extended past the end of December 2024. It doesn't involve going back to college, as there are routes available that include experience worker assessments and professional discussion. And then finally, that grants to help with the cost might be available from CITB for levy paying employers. So the information, I suppose, it's not earth-shattering. It's not a silver bullet for many people either, I suppose, but it's useful to have it there. But I think it was good for us in that a lot of the stuff that was being said by the National Task Force is information that we have been saying from the start when people were ringing, and particularly I think that the stuff in and around it not going back to college, is really, really important for people to understand and get their head around. I spoke to a provider recently, and they have delivered a level 3 NVQ in occupational work supervision, which would get a supervisor card, and that was based on 4 2-hour sessions, so 8 hours in total. Feedback, they produced a video for the candidates, and feedback was really, really positive. They talked about how it was just providing information that they had to hand because they do it every day. But it also made them think about how they do things and resulted in changes to how they work for the better. So it's not just about that tick box, like I need to get a qualification to get a card here. So I suppose really just if there's one thing that you take away from today, I think it would be that the NVQ isn't going back to school. It's just really demonstrating that what you do on a day-to-day basis, and that's then to a national standard. Okay, so before summarising, I'm not too far off finishing the presentation, but before I wanted to just kind of update on some upcoming plans. So we're obviously going to continue to communicate. This is really important that the industry gets as much information about it as possible. We have been writing to individuals in advance of their card renewing to let them know about the changes since the end of 2019. So I think calculating that's probably 50,000 individuals have got letters telling them directly about these changes over the course of the last number of years. Employers also get a letter at the same time if they're linked to the employee that lists the employees that cards are renewing and talks about the changes there. So employers have been being told directly for some time now. We're obviously going to continue to do that, but what we're looking at now, obviously, it's 18 months to go, sort of at the end of June, and that's a really good opportunity just to kind of up the message, and it's a useful time frame just to get people to set up and take notice. What similar to those renewal letters I've just talked about, there are obviously a growing number of people who have renewed their card until the end of 2024. And instead of writing to them 2 months in advance of the renewal date, we're going to write to them 18 months in advance of the renewal date, just to say, there's a call to action here. You need to do something, take action now. And we're going to obviously repeat that. We'll probably repeat that with 12 months to go and 6 months to go. just to really hammer home that message that you need to start taking action if you want the card that you currently have to be renewed past the end of 2024. Obviously, the webinar today is being recorded and will be shared on both the Safety Group website and the CEF website. So hopefully that becomes a useful kind of resource for people just to check in with. And then progress on the last 2 points on the slide there. They have just been made, like literally, it was on Tuesday there this week, there was a joint council meeting. So we're looking into employers working with already approved NVQ providers to train one of their experienced employees to assess their own employees. This will help obviously the training provider because they might be struggling to recruit assessors, but it also may result in some cost saving to the employer. But also it's that kind of, I think people, again, going back to the NVQ, and people are scared of it, and it's going back to college, but it's not, it's having a chat with an assessor and providing information about what you do on a day-to-day basis. But there's still that feeling that can be scary, for want of a better way of putting it, for people if it's, you know, someone they don't know. So having a fellow employee as the assessor might help with that. We're just obviously got agreement for that on Tuesday. So the plan is to kind of organise a pilot on that, and hopefully then if it proves successful, it will be a useful case study for the industry, and would hopefully encourage other employers to follow suit. Probably worthwhile mentioning again here that you know, that example that I used about the level 3 occupational work supervision, you know, people think, oh, an MVQ takes 2 years or whatever. It doesn't. It can be done quickly, but does obviously involve a bit of work to get it in that short period of time. And then the last one is an appeals process the Joint Council have approved, and that's for people who have completed a qualification but can't find the record. We appreciate that there are people that may have done an apprenticeship 20 years ago and are struggling to come up with the documentation. So we have, as a scheme, had several meetings with CSCS, which is the large scheme in England, because they already run an appeals process, and we just wanted to kind of get an idea about how they did that and whether we could replicate it here. So that was agreed at Joint Council. We're just sort of finalising the mechanics and how that will work. But just, I suppose, really those last 2 points and the slide in general is that we're looking at a whole manner of things to help candidates out in this situation. So thank you very much for listening. You'll be glad to know that this is my last slide. I suppose I just wanted to really finish with a couple of key messages for you to take away from the presentation today. The first one isn't actually on the slide, but I've mentioned it before. I just want to really hammer it home that an NVQ is not going back to school or college. It's just demonstrating that what you do on a day-to-day basis, and it can be done on site, partly it can be done with a discussion with an assessor, and it doesn't have to be a daunting experience. And also that the assessors are trained to help you, in effect, you know, and facilitate if you have issues, they will help you through the process. But yes, overall, obviously significant changes to CSR, changes that won't be easy for some people, but I suppose will ultimately leave the industry with a more robust scheme going forward. Changes aren't a choice, you know, they are necessary to retain parity with GB. I mentioned throughout, CSR doesn't want to prevent anyone from getting a card, and we're working hard with various mitigations to make sure this is the case. And then just to finish off, I suppose, I think probably the industry really is on a bit of a journey. We are behind GB in the respect that they have had the MVQ requirement for a number of years, and they're also very resolute on having the card for the job that you're doing. This is obviously where we want to be and where we want to move to, but we are a bit behind that curve. But also that it's likely that there will be further changes that we have to implement to keep pace with GB. You know, we don't want to operate a two-tier system. So really that kind of finishes me off. I know there were some questions submitted when individuals signed up to the webinar, and I think Wendy and maybe Nicola are going to ask those now, along with any questions that have been asked as submitted during the presentation. So overall, thank you very much for listening. And as I say, do get in touch with the scheme CSR. The information is on the website, how to get in touch if you need anything clarified. Myself and the team that are based there are more than happy to help you through this process. So thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Thank you, Jonathan. A lot of information to take on board. I think we've been kind of trying to get into the way of looking at these, but push the December 24 thing down the line probably. Probably a lot of people in the same boat, but I think now what's happening is with cards coming up for renewal sooner rather than later, it will help push this through and get us more used to the processes that's required. I'll just kick off with some of the questions that they've been sent on already here. If someone has originally, and some of these might already be covered in the card, but maybe just to emphasize it again, John, if that's right.
Yeah, no problem.
If someone originally has a gold card, building site supervisor, which expires this year, what qualifications do they require for this to be kept as a gold card?
Okay, so I suppose firstly, if it's this year, they can do the supervisor refresher, and that card will be renewed to the end of 2024 to buy them some time if they want to do that. But in relation to the qualification aspect, if they are working as a supervisor, there are a number of options available to them. The main ones really, so there's 2 NVQ levels for supervisors. There's the NVQ level 3 in occupational work supervision, or the NVQ 4 in construction site supervision. The level 4 they've just mentioned, that's for those with responsibility, I suppose, for supervising entire sites. And that includes specialisms for building civil engineering, residential house building, there's various different ones there that can be drilled into. And then the level 3, that is more, the way I describe that, it's kind of like someone who has maybe is like a squad leader of a squad of brickies or a squad of joiners, but doesn't have, they're supervising that squad, but they don't have responsibility for the entire site. So there are a couple of options there that people can go down. And worthwhile hammering home. It's just a good example that I've heard recently, and I'm not naming the training provider, and I don't have any affiliation or any of that sort of stuff, but that level 3 supervisor was delivered in pretty much in 8 hours. So it's not that huge thing that people think it is.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, Jonathan, I'll ask the second question, Wendy. I have a problem with my video, so you'd be grateful you don't have to see me today. I take it you can all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Jonathan, second question then is, if someone has originally a black card for a manager which would expire this year, what qualifications do they require for this to be kept as a black card? Okay, so again, it's sort of similar really to the last question. Again, if it expires this year, they can do the refresher manager course, or senior manager course, sorry, and that card would expire at the end of 2024, but in relation to kind of continuing that beyond that, they would need, because the black card is for someone operating at director or senior manager level, they need the level 7 in construction senior management. Other alternatives would be the AQP, so academically qualified person card, and that's for someone that has maybe a degree in some sort of construction related subject. And the other one would be the PQP, so that if somebody is professionally qualified, so if they're a member of CIOB or they're a member of ICE, or there's lots and lots of various different professional bodies, so there will be again a couple of options available for people.
Thanks, Jonathan. For professional cards, the options currently available are health and safety practitioner and the AQ person or professionally qualified person. The AQP and PQP cards require higher level of health and safety course specifically tailored for managers and directors. Could CEF consider doing a tailored APQ or PQP type consultant card, which is aimed at professional graduates and lower level management staff, so therefore more targeted at regulations such as CDM and basics of health and safety law, general site safety, etc. At present, we send most of our technical staff on the health and safety training course, but this is more aimed at tradespersons.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose that is something that has been looked at before. I can see there is a bit of a mismatch that, those people in that situation, they will be on site. And so basic health and safety is useful, so that they're not a danger to themselves or anyone else on the site. But they may need to have that kind of higher level knowledge. And some of that is included on the sort of manager level course. All I can really say is that we'll take it away and consider it again. We didn't move there at the first time that we looked at it, but I suppose maybe if the person that raised that question, if they wanted to get in touch with me directly after the webinar for the next week or so, it would be useful to have a chat just one-to-one on that, and we can see where we go.
Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan, the next question then. The CEF website states that people attending site to perform non-construction related occupations should not be expected to carry a card. If you work in a non-construction related role, you don't need a card. Similarly, if you're on a short-term work experience placement for less than 30 days, you don't need a card. How widely known applied is the above statement across the industry, as most contractors expect or require any frequent site visitors, including professionals, to provide a CSR card at inductions?
Okay, so I suppose that information was only really put on the website in March, and it came from the kind of national guidance. And I think probably the thing is that sites in England are wide, like they're much different than sites in Northern Ireland, mainly. They're kind of, at times, they're sort of mini villages almost. CSCS used to issue cards to people. I always use this example, that refilled the vending machines in the canteen area. And I think it was an effort to cut down on those sort of things and the kind of no card, no entry sort of kind of thing that had come on in England in particular. Some sites will still insist on everyone having a card. It's up to the site ultimately, and it's basic health and safety for anyone, training on it. It's not a bad thing. It helps reduce the risk of an individual being a danger to themselves or others, really. But it's up for sites to really decide on that one.
So basically, it's the principal contractor's choice as to what they actually require. And they should look at that guidance and think, do we need to be asking everybody? We would encourage them to do that. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, I suppose as well, you could have people working both sides of the border here. So sometimes what'll work in one jurisdiction may not always work in the other when it comes to things like that as well. So
yeah, in relation to the down south, we've talked about the mutual recognition, and that it relates specifically to that one, the CSR one-day course kind of thing.
Thanks, John. The construction industry is ageing, and our experience to date, many of the gold card time served skilled craft individuals such as joiners, bricklayers, supervisors, etc., are reluctant to enter back into educational MVQ and feel let down by the industry that they have been a main part for 20 or 10, 20 years. What process is in place to retain these skilled individuals in the industry? And I suppose just an additional point to that one as well is, I know you're saying it's not come back to school, but it's still the whole paperwork exercise that people's feeling a wee bit edgy about. There's still this perception that they're going to have to do a load of paperwork. So maybe.
Yeah, well, I suppose just to start off answering that, the last thing we want to do is force people out of the industry. We're well aware of the skills shortage and that sort of stuff, and that has been made. As I mentioned during the presentation, the representation to the CLC auditor, that was one of the points I made. I hear the industry saying that, but I suppose we are where we are at the minute. The CLC don't appear to be changing their view, and So, it sort of sound like a broken record, but, there are lots of alternatives. The city and guilds, lots of people will have those qualifications coming up through the industry. Apprenticeships, we accept apprenticeships going back across the years. But if not, ultimately these people have to, if they want to retain that kind of the card they have, they will have to do an NVQ, and I'll repeat myself for the 100th time about it's not going back to school. And I think what we're trying to do actually, which might help, is put together some case studies, because it's all well and good, Mr. Grey suit here, telling people in the industry about what's happening, but I think if it's people, there are people out there that have gone through the process and found it not to be as daunting as they thought it would be, and that they come out with a qualification and they feel vindicated that they have that national standard and things like that. So we're going to try and get some kind of case studies, videos maybe done in relation to that, just to help. So yeah, that's kind of the key message there.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one then is, many workers who completed NVQs many years ago did not realise that 10 plus years later, the most valuable item that they have isn't the card that they produce at each site, but the actual copy of that NVQ. And I've come across this a lot in the past too. Many have misplaced or never received their NVQs from previous employers and are now finding it nearly impossible to track them down. Is there any assistance available to those individuals, Jonathan?
I suppose really what I would do, advise them to contact the awarding organisations. I know the awarding organisations are being inundated with these queries at the minute. The positive thing is that there's not too many construction awarding organisations, and whilst there's a couple of different names, one of the main ones has kind of evolved through maybe 3 different kind of name changes, but they retain the records, some of the records from the older named organisation. I said, I sort of joked about it, but it's a serious point. Have a hook in your attic and your mum's attic, and people have these things, and there might not be to hand, but the number of people, we have been pleasantly surprised, I suppose, by the number of people that are producing qualifications that they didn't think they could find or have. I also mentioned the appeals process that we're just trying to get up and running. We do acknowledge that it might be difficult, and if they can submit an appeal once that comes online, we'll look and try and be as understanding and as lenient as possible, but there would need to be some sort of kind of way that we can hang our hat that we would be relatively sure on the balance of probability that they have completed that qualification.
Yeah, totally understand that. And I have to say, from personal experience, even my own qualifications, I went to work abroad, and somebody else was moving into my office desk, and all my hard copies of everything ended up disappearing in the ether, and thankfully I had copies of them all. So scan and take copies of anything you have now, because you may need it in 10-15 years time, is my advice.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
For workers who decide they're not going down the NVQ route to renew their gold card supervisors, but will do the SMSTS, can or does this qualification transfer onto the rear of their CSR card if they're holding a green labour or white health and safety card?
Okay, so there are a couple of things in this question. So the SMSTS is the CITB GB course. It's not a CSR course, but we do accept the SMSTS as equivalent to our 4-day supervisor, and we accept the SMSTS refresher as equivalent to our 1-day CSR supervisor refresher. I suppose that's the health and safety element, so it's not the qualification element, so it's not equivalent to an NVQ or anything like that. And unfortunately, we can't put it on the back of a green labourer card or a health and safety trained card, because it's not, that there's a mismatch in the cards there. It's just not an option, unfortunately, so we can't do it.
Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan, is there a way that the new NVQ requirements are accepted for those with decades of experience in a supervisor management role and who are probably going to retire soon?
I wasn't 100% sure exactly.
Sorry.
I think basically, like, yeah, ultimately we can't issue exceptions based on age or proximity to requirement. You know, it's like, from experience, it's really difficult speaking to a 60-year-old man or lady on the phone who has worked in the industry, and you know, we are empathetic on the phone and try not to be computer says no, but ultimately the requirement is there regardless of what age you are. You know, I suppose those people at that age have to look and determine, do they want to go down the qualification route if they are very close to retirement. But unfortunately we can't you know, offer any exceptions in relation to that.
Thanks, Jonathan.
John, the next question has probably been asked or answered already through some of the slides already, but is the CSR card for skilled operators acceptable in ROI, or would we also require a solus CSCS card? So
yeah, I think we've probably answered that hopefully clearly in the presentation, but no, ultimately it's unfortunately the answer to that. That question relates, I think, to a blue plant card, and unfortunately it's not accepted in the Republic at the minute, and they need to contact SOLAS and see what they need to do to kind of change their card over to the SOLAS CSCS one.
Yeah, we had a couple of guys that had MVQs. So once they have the MVQ level 2, they basically had to go and do an interview at Mount Lucas. They didn't have to do any additional training, but they had to go and do an interview at Mount Lucas to get the card following, but they had to have the MVQ level 2 or above.
Yeah, most people with plant cards, their MVQ requirement has been in for plant since 2006. So most people with a plant card have that MVQ, but there is that. Yeah, it's good, I suppose, that they're not making you do everything, and there's some exception, which is useful to hear, definitely.
Yeah, obviously there's a cost for the interview, but that's not. You just have to weigh up each individual person on an individual basis, as far as experience has taught me anyway. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And fair to say, I'll just add in on that one, fair to say too that for anyone that has done those plant MVQs, again, get your people to check with previous employers if the guys themselves can't come up with the MVQs, because you know they could well still be held on file somewhere to make it much easier then to go through that process and not have to redo. Okay, Jonathan, the next question then is, we've been having issues in getting an appropriate CSR card for some of our engineers, for example, mechanical and electrical, who take on a supervisory role as they're not considered an engineering degree that's recognised in association with construction or civil engineering. And I actually have had experience of working with this as well. Is there an exception that can be made for such with employers' references?
Well, mechanical and electrical trades, mentioned in the presentation, aren't covered by CSR because they're not under the remit of Joint Council. We do issue, we recognise through the Build Safe initiative, for example, that CSR has become the kind of standard in Northern Ireland, and so people in those trades tend to get maybe a health and safety training card to meet that requirement. But there are other schemes. The electrical card, I think, is the DCS, electrical contractor scheme, I think that is, and then there's skills card for mechanical, and I think it's JIB for plumbers, and I would advise people in those areas to seek out those card schemes. It'll still be an NVQ, but it'll be more related to their kind of job role.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
Is there any way the cards that did not receive the full fee full 4 years, so renewals during say 22-23, can be reassessed, as some may already have an NVQ or higher level qualification, but this may not have been taken into consideration at the time of renewal process? So, for example, some staff have industry experience, 20 years supervising on sites, along with a degree in civil engineering, but because they didn't have a specific NVQ, they may not have got the gold or platinum card at that particular time.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to interpret the question here, and I suppose what I'm sort of saying is that yes, if someone has been issued a short dated card that didn't take account of a qualification that they had, one of the accepted qualifications, then it can be obviously upgraded to the full 4-year card. From the date that the health and safety training was completed, they'll get the 4-year duration. I hope I'm answering the question there. I'm not 100% sure, but
I think it's just, you know, if somebody has a degree in civil engineering, for example, with 20 years experience, so it doesn't actually specifically say supervisory course. You know, we may have construction management. I suppose it's just to kind of highlight, you know, which cards maybe that's something you're doing.
Again, I suppose, you know, these ones are difficult, you know, and I'll use that example of, so somebody is working as a building site supervisor, but has a degree in civil engineering. Does the degree in civil engineering entitle them to supervise a construction site? That's a pretty difficult question to answer. You know, ultimately, they have a lot of knowledge from that degree, and they could get an AQP card based on that degree. And it's really, you know, they obviously have then experience of managing the site and all the competence that comes from that. But it's very difficult for us as a scheme to say you can, you know, the aim, I suppose, really here is that you have a card for the job that you're doing. So if you're supervising a site, you should have a supervisor card, really. And that would involve, you know, we can't give that on the basis of a degree, but we could give them an AQP card if they found that useful, and employers have a judgment call, I suppose, here, and clients as well, really. You know, the card scheme, whilst it's a very useful tool to display that someone has health and safety training and now you know, a qualification going forward, you know, it can't be the be all and end all of whether someone has the experience to do the role that they're engaged in.
I think the biggest issue with that would be if you arrive on a site and somebody's wanting to see a gold or platinum card, and then they have an AQP. So even though they've been doing that role,
well, the AQP is a platinum card, so that, you know, they would have a platinum card, but ultimately it's saying that they're academically qualified in civil engineering, and it's, you know, does that make them a site supervisor? You know, that's a really hard question to answer, and it's up to, I suppose, the individual, the employer. You know, I should say but the scheme can't really decide on, you know, the guidance is have the card for the occupation you're employed in. And so if the occupation is building site supervisor, then coming from that, they should have a building site supervisor, but that would mean that they have to go back and do an MVQ level 3 or 4. And it's, you know, but they have a qualification, which is a perfectly good qualification. But it's very difficult for us to provide guidance on whether, you know, I can't come out and say, yes, an AQP card is okay for supervising a site. And that doesn't really tie in with the CLC messaging.
Yeah, what you're saying there, Jonathan, is basically you can have a degree, but it doesn't actually make you a supervisor, a competent supervisor. So you've passed that degree in that subject, but you still then, when you go into employment, you will learn your trade as a supervisor as you progress through your time managing people. Yeah,
but the problem is, Nicola, you don't have an actual piece of paper to say you've been supervising sites for 20 years.
Yeah, so that's where they basically have to then what Jonathan's saying is they then do have to do the MVQ, go through that MVQ process to show the evidence.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's, even though they've been, like, the majority of our sites, a lot of engineers, site managers have had their degree course. They've been doing their CSR 1-day course with CEF for many, you know, for several occasions. But now means they still need an MVQ to renew the card, to renew their platinum.
Yeah, I suppose these questions are really difficult because people with degrees will be doing a lot of things on construction sites. You know, it could be supervising, it could be managing, it could be more office-based or professional. But if they are supervising a site, I suppose ultimately the card for them is the building site supervisor, which would require the NVQ level 3 or 4, and that relates to supervision.
But if it's a manager's card, then it's the higher level again.
Yeah, because they would be managing the site. Yeah.
Just it's a 6 or 7 then for a manager.
Level 6 is the more kind of operational site sort of stuff. The level 7 is more kind of director type stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next question then, can you give further clarification on the NVQ level supervisor qualification? An attendee has been completing this course for 2 years and is almost finished. And they've been advised by others in their peer group that this would be a normal duration. The course content does not relate purely to site supervising, but to other aspects of a construction company. Will this continue to be the only supervisor route for the construction industry after January 25? And the key thing here is that the attendee feels there will be a huge gap in the market for qualified supervisors going forward. Jonathan?
Okay, so I suppose I covered off really in response to one of the other questions. You know, the qualifications accepted for a supervisor card are the level 3 NVQ in occupational work supervision or the level 4 in construction site supervision. There's lots of specialisms in that one relating to different sectors of the industry. In relation to the 2-year duration, you know, NVQs, you know, it's how long is a piece of string. There's lots of different things that impact how long it takes to complete. I'll go back to the example I used about the level 3 qualification being completed pretty much in 8 hours. I'm not an NVQ expert. That's not my you know, job role type thing. But as I say, I think my understanding is it depends on how long, you know, it depends on experience of the person doing it. It depends on the kind of engagement of the employee. If they're asked to gather up information, how quickly they return that to the assessor. Obviously, employers play a role here because those guys are on site, and you know they may need time to gather that, whether it's during the day or outside hours is up to the employer. But you know, it really, there's lots of different things there. In relation to the course not you know, relating purely to site supervising, you know, as I say, I'm not an NVQ expert. I don't know the ins and outs of each NVQ and what is required, but if it's been approved by an awarding organisation, the content, I would expect it to relate to that subject, obviously. And in relation to a huge gap in the market for qualified supervisors, you know, there are supervisors that will need to upskill. I think that's probably the area that I would be most concerned about out of the kind of the trades supervisor, manager, or senior manager. And that quite a lot of supervisors, you know, they didn't train to be a supervisor. They you know, they were maybe a trade that worked their way up or whatever, and they haven't actually had any training on being a supervisor, and so they're unlikely to have some sort of qualification, and so they will have to demonstrate that through the NVQ process. But the process is there for them to do it, and it can be definitely easier than the 2 years that is mentioned here.
I would say you probably would suggest that question poser contacts CEF for further information, Jonathan, just based on that, your answer.
Anybody that has further questions afterwards, I'm more than happy to chat on an individual one-to-one basis over the next week or so, or just whenever suits really. You know, we're here. Maybe if you want, I can share my contact details with you guys afterwards, and you can put it out as part of the webinar or something, so that people have a kind of direct link in.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Jonathan, if a member of staff is qualified health and safety practitioner and holds an EBOY certificate or diploma, and they occasionally have to access a construction site, do they require a CSR card?
This really goes back to one of the other questions again. I suppose it depends on the client or the contractor and or the site rules on the site. We have a health and safety practitioner card because the industry asked for a card to recognise people in this situation, and it's actually the only card that doesn't require them to come on health and safety training, because obviously it's recognised that these people are very highly qualified in relation to the field of health and safety. The health and safety practitioner card, you have to have NISG, general diploma, or the level 6 in occupational health and safety, and you have to be either a member of IOSH, a minimum of a technician member, or a member of IIRSM, and that's at the minimum of associate level. But you have to be clearly checked and make sure that you're participating in the CPD cycle, because that's one of the requirements of the professional card, that there's CPD involved.
Jonathan, then those are some of the questions we've already received. Another one then is there an actual list of training providers that are doing the NVQ level 3 and 4 available, or the 6 and 7?
We don't have a list at the minute. Initially we had looked at it and we were very wary that CSR or CEF or whoever, by listing, is there a tacit kind of recommendation that these people will, and so if there was an issue with that organisation, does it come back to CEF? And obviously we have no input in the NVQ provision. I reached out to all the training providers, CSR providers, but there's also obviously a number of other well-known providers in the Northern Ireland sort of training area. I did reach out to them, I think probably 2 months ago, to try and get a list from them of what they provided. And to be honest, their response wasn't great. And there are lots of qualifications being delivered, but just, the response to the query wasn't fantastic. And so to be honest, I haven't had a chance to follow that up. It's something that I hope to do. And we will then decide, I suppose, whether we publish it or not. It's good for our staff, so that if people are contacting us saying, do you know anywhere that does it, we would have that information to hand, type thing. So it's something we are working on, but just need to put it together.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, then we have another one here. HSE inspectors have said that construction degrees do not have a module covering site supervision, which means that the degree is not equivalent training, and they still need to do an NVQ level 4 minimum. What is your view on this? Now, I think this relates back to the previous.
I think that's hopefully. Yeah, I think that we've probably covered that in the question a couple of questions ago, really, that, I can't say that a degree is a qualification that entitles you to supervise a site. The CLC position is that you should have a card for the occupation in which you're currently employed, and so if you're employed as a supervisor, then it's the supervisor NVQ probably. So I think we've covered that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's another question there too. What if a person has no record of previous education, their NVQ or studying guild? So it's probably the same again, that you're going to have to sign up.
If they haven't been through any of that, ultimately, if they wish to retain a card at the level that they, if say, for example, it's a trade card that, say they're a gold joiner and they want to retain a gold joiner card, then they have to do a level 3 NVQ in that particular, in the area that relates to them.
Yeah.
Okay, and then with another question here, do you need to renew CSR card if you're now IOSH qualified? And I would again say the two are very separate things, so I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, no, obviously they are separate. I did mention that the health and safety practitioner card is available if people do want to be recognised as a health and safety practitioner. But if they want the card, obviously, based on that, they need to contact us to get it renewed. There's no link between CSR and IOSH or anything. They're two separate organisations.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Is the NVQ route written into statute law, or is this guidance only? So,
yeah, it's a really good question. It's not written in the law. It is, as I say, it's come from CLC, and I hope I've explained kind of where it's come from and the changes. It's really being driven by the English construction industry, and for the reasons that I've talked through in the presentation, we felt that we needed to comply with it. Yeah, I think I don't really have anything else to say on that yet. Yeah. Sorry, I do actually. I was trying to rack my brain there. It's built into the Build UK training standard. It's one of these things that is becoming best practice in England. Anecdotal evidence is, particularly if you're going to England, you won't get on site if you don't have a CSCS card or equivalent. Here, things are different here, and we are doing it so that people can get on site in England if they need to. People here, anecdotally, I would say, if they've done the health and safety training, because that's the requirement that's listed in Build Safe for public sector contracts. But I suppose ultimately there's the legislative requirement that employers required to ensure that people they engage have had suitable training and everything to ensure that they're competent to do the role that they do. So it's indirectly kind of covered through legislation that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question then. We're not giving you a break at all here, Jonathan.
No, quick fire round. Fine, keep going.
This is a really good one, actually. Is there support available to help a business assess who needs what? We have around 100 employees, and the changes that are applicable to do with the different levels of qualifications are obviously going to be different. So it's been very difficult trying to determine what cards are needed and what level NVQ each person, each employee would need to do. What would be your advice on that?
I don't think there's not we as an organisation will certainly on the phone and stuff try and help. We don't have a dedicated service that you can kind of submit to all your employees and we will say you need to get this and you need to get that, because ultimately it's up to the employer and the individual. We as a card scheme can only issue cards on the basis of the qualification that is provided to us. We don't know what you do on a day-to-day basis. So I suppose to really basically break it down, if you're a tradesperson, a joiner, a bricklayer, any of those sort of things, you need an NVQ level 2 or 3 and you'll get a blue or a gold card based on that. If you're a supervisor, you need to do a level 3 or 4 and you'll get a gold card based on that. If you're a manager, you would need an NVQ level 6 and you'll get a platinum card for that. And if you are a senior director, you would do level 7 NVQ and get a black card. And maybe worthwhile highlighting, if the people are working in a labouring occupation, they don't need a qualification, they don't need an NVQ, and they can do the one-day health and safety. And similarly, if they don't want to get a qualification, they can get the health and safety training card based on the one-day health and safety. But all those decisions are thankfully not my decision, and they're the decision of the employer and the employee.
Yeah, I think
if there are specific queries that they're not sure about, by all means, lift the phone and the team will try their best to help.
Yeah, I think that kind of answers the next question too there. Does that mean that a current black card holder with a construction degree cannot retain his card without a level 7 in construction management? Will they have to switch to an AQP card? So it's really down to the individual.
Yeah, if they have a degree, and I suppose that's a little more complicated in that, so that the level 7 the black card tends to be for senior directors or owners of businesses who need to know stuff about corporate manslaughter and all that sort of stuff, as well as all the stuff about running the business. And that's what the training and the NVQ focuses on. Whether if they have a degree, that, you know, if you have a degree in civil engineering, does that mean that you can run a civil engineering company? It certainly helps, but it's back to that kind of the stuff we've talked about supervisor again.
Yeah. So for the senior executives course then, what type of card will you be getting then? Unless you have an NVQ, you will be getting the black card, is that right?
If you go on the senior executive course you want to get a black card, you will need to have the NVQ. If so, the PQP and the AQP, we have the health and safety element of that is one of the recognised sort of manager or senior manager courses. So there's the essential health and safety for managers or senior executives, and there's the IOSH alternative courses that are also accepted. So they, you know, if you come on the senior execs and you have a degree, then you can get an AQP card, or if you come on the senior execs course and you have you're a member of CIOB or one of the approved membership bodies, then professional bodies, you can get a platinum PQP card then on the basis of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to combine two questions here, which are very, very similar. Can you please tell us more about how we can get one of our own members of personnel to act as an NVQ assessor? And then someone else had asked, are you offering NVQ assessor training so we could offer the in-house NVQs?
Okay. Yeah, good question again. I suppose this is really just something that we have not come up with, you know, but we sort of thought that it might help, and it's just gone through during council on Tuesday. So we have one employer has said that they would like to sort of do a pilot, but you know, don't let that stop if you think it's useful. The way I would see it working is, you know, obviously you have to be qualified as an assessor, and surprise, surprise, you need to have an NVQ to be qualified to do that. My understanding, having spoken to one provider, and again, there are lots of providers out there, you know, reach out to other providers, but it's probably at kind of 12-week turnaround. I think they said potentially about 700 quid, but there is CITB grant aid for that. And once you're qualified as an assessor, you would need to link up with one of the existing, you know, just because you're approved as an assessor doesn't mean that you can provide NVQs, because there's you have to be a awarding, I'm not sure the exact wording here, but you have to be an approved organisation with assessors to get certificates put through one of the awarding organisations. So rather than having to go through the employer having to go through the rigmarole of becoming an approved organisation, it's better to link up with someone who already is doing it. So I would again encourage the person to reach out to some of the training organisations, say, would you like, we have an assessor here, can we assess our guys through you? But there's a lot in there. So again, if that person wants more information, I'm happy to have a 10-minute chat with them on the phone at some stage.
Thank you.
If the health and safety training card is not accepted in the UK, what card is required for the likes of a QS who previously had a
visitor card, probably?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I moved it across to the answered one.
Yes. I was just reading.
Ultimately, they would require probably an AQP or a PQP, depending on the qualification that they have. Neither in Northern Ireland or GB, the construction site visitor card no longer exists. And again, I suppose it's up to site. You know, if you're a QS, do you need a card? Are you doing construction work on the site on a regular basis? But again, that's up to the site and whatever to decide whether that's the case.
it's really a matter of selecting the appropriate card whenever you're submitting the application form. Make sure you're getting the card that will be appropriate.
Well, yeah, it's like, I suppose we are the card scheme for Northern Ireland. So ultimately we're trying to provide cards for people who work in Northern Ireland, but we're very aware of the fact that people could be working 1 week in London and 1 week in Dublin and then back into Belfast type thing. And unfortunately, there's not always a card that will cover all jurisdictions. And it's about trying to select the card that will cover you in the majority, I suppose, really is the best advice I can give there.
Yeah. So it does seem strange that the health and safety trained logo doesn't have the same stamping as the labourer card. It just seems bizarre.
It's because there has to be, in effect, a qualification linked to the CLC, CSCS logo cards, and there's not a qualification linked to the health and safety trained card. But we obviously, as I said in the presentation, took that decision to do that one because Build Safe Initiative, the main requirement there is that you have health and safety training, so it meets the requirement of public sector procurement here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now before I do the next question, can I just ask the attendees, I think we have, I'm looking at the time, we've still some answers or questions and answers to do in the Q&A, but Wendy, we've also got some in the chat to go through. So if I could just say that would be the last. Don't pose any more questions now, please. And obviously, Jonathan is happy for you to contact him at a later date if we haven't been able to get through your question. So my next one then would be, it was mentioned during the presentation that HNCs, HNDs are acceptable. Would these also be accepted for the skilled and craft cards respectively?
No, because, and I'm sort of shooting from the hip a little bit here, but my understanding is that HNCs are level 4 on the qualification framework, which is above the kind of level 2 and level 3, and they tend to be in, there's HND in building, for example, and we, building isn't a trade as such. We tend to issue to trades such as joiner or painter and decorator. So no, the HNDs or HNCs are specifically for the AQP card.
Yeah, and I can basically add my background is I have an HND in building studies, and then once I went into employment, moved straight into a trainee health and safety role back in the 1990s. But basically the course content was about site management, basically. So it is a higher level.
I think they're a bridge kind of just before degree level type thing is my understanding of HNDs and HNCs type thing. So
very similar, but more of a higher level rather than we would have had older people on the course who had been a tradesperson and who then wanted to move into management.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Jonathan.
Where are we going now? Oh, the card application form has a section for the training provider to complete. Some of the courses are done online, such as the IOSH one-day course. So can we complete this section on their behalf?
Yeah, that they are more this, I suppose, the manager level courses, and yes, we do accept if we have an IOSH certificate, an IOSH are saying this person has completed this course, it's irrelevant to us whether it was completed in a classroom or online, and yes, they can complete that. Ultimately, if they just submit the certificate, it's probably a bit of a rigmarole to complete those little bits in the forms. We just attach the certificate, and that's probably enough.
Right.
And probably fair to say, Jonathan, if there's any queries with the application, the people
within the team there that will talk you through it.
Come back.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay, the next one then, somebody's saying, surely it's all about competency. A university qualified engineer with a CSR AQP card and who completes the relevant supervisor or manager course would be competent to supervise or manage. Why are they needing to complete an MVQ?
we've talked about this a lot, and it's very difficult for me. If the employer feels that that person is competent to supervise a site based on their dealings with them, then that's the employer's decision. It ultimately rests on the employer to make that call. As a scheme, we can't make that call. So if that employer wants to deem that person competent to supervise a site, then as long as they can back it up that the person is competent, then it's the employers. They can do it if they wish.
Thank you.
Next question, Jonathan. Where can we find more specific detail on what alternative qualifications are acceptable?
I think, like, obviously on the website it lists the stuff that I've included in my presentation. There's not a definitive list. It's really impossible, and it would be, we would be updating it on a day in, day out basis. They're the kind of key ones. What I would say, we had one submitted 2 weeks ago, and I spent a good period of time understanding. I spoke to a local college that delivered it to understand where the sort of level. So that was City and Guilds. I think there's licenseship and graduateships, and they are actually equivalent to the level 6 NVQs and level 7 NVQs, depending on the level. If you have a qualification and you're not sure, send it in, and we will do our best. We are finding our way here, so we're just send it in and give us a bit of time to check it out.
Yeah.
Okay, next one then. What evidence is accepted for showing a person has an apprenticeship?
Ideally, there would be some form of apprenticeship certificate or letter from the employer or the training college that they completed it with. These ones are difficult because they're, it's easy if you have an NVQ certificate saying I've got an NVQ apprenticeships, because they were, some of them, obviously now if someone goes through an apprenticeship, it will come with a level 2 or level 3 NVQ certificate as well. So we would focus on that. But the older ones, we will accept, some sort of certificate confirming it, or some real obvious proof that they have completed it. It may have to go through the appeals process that I've talked about, but again, send it in, and we will be, I don't want to give the impression that we're being lenient, because, we have to stick to the standard, but we will look favourably on people that have some form of documentation.
So basically you're looking for, even in the first instance, send in references. If you cannot actually come up with a certificate, send in references, history, etc. to start with.
Well, I think probably if they don't have a certificate, if they get hold of, we will be putting stuff on the website probably in the next week or two on this appeals process, and it will detail exactly what is required to be included as part of the appeals process. And one of the things that we agreed at Joint Council was basically people get one shot at submitting the information. So I don't really want someone to send something in for, by all means, in the meantime, give us a ring and we'll look at it. But if it needs to go to the appeal, it'll probably be maybe 2 weeks, a month before we get that up and running, because it was literally agreed at Joint Council on Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
John, NVQ employer assessors, this appears to be going down the route of Tesco's packing your own shopping. The cost of this training is expensive. Why would employers wish to invest more resources when we can get Irish cards at the same level of training quality, and most are accepted on NI construction sites?
Well, Tesco's, there's a problem in the bagging area type thing. The way we saw it was, if the person if they need the NVQ and they want to go down that route, there are positives to it, and the positives would be that they're being assessed by someone they're more comfortable with. That's definitely a plus. There is a cost of getting the person trained to be an assessor, but as I say, that, as far as I'm aware, there's a CITB grant that would cover some of the cost of that, and the cost that one of the training providers that I spoke to, that they would take off the cost of an NVQ would be made back. You know, the cost of the assessor training would be made back very quickly. I'm talking in probably 2 candidates. So it's there would be a cost saving there as well. The Irish thing, you know, for most, like in down south, CEF Pass covers the majority of people down south, and so you have to do the 1-day CEF Pass course, or they have now this online renewal that's causing a bit of trouble. But I'm not really sure about the cheaper Irish qualifications. I don't have knowledge on that, to be fair.
Thanks.
Okay, next one then. Sounds like Northern Ireland is going down the same route as Republic of Ireland many years ago. A plant operative in ROI took his case for having to repeat plant operative training over and over and won. And this is why in ROI, the SOLAS plant card, once received, only requires a renewal, as a qualification is a qualification and a skill is a skill. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I suppose from our perspective, the plant card in Northern Ireland, you do the qualification, which is the NVQ, and the renewal is the health and safety training, which is the same for all the cards. That's just a refresher health and safety training. For a plant card, you don't have to do more training to or more qualifications to renew your card. So it wouldn't be the same as the situation described there.
I think it's important to note that the 1-day CSR course is the equivalent to the CEF Pass, which you must have along with your plant card when working in the south. So it's basically you're renewing your health and safety section of your card, not the complete plant training.
Yeah, exactly.
And the requirement for that is because then that shows that you're keeping up with any changes in legislation, and there's proof there that you have actually attended some form of health and safety training in the period.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Is the SMSTS or SSSTS equivalent to MVQ? So I think I've already touched that one already.
Yeah, they are health and safety courses. They're not well, in England, supervisor and manager. We don't recognise the 2-day SSSTS course as equivalent to any of our courses, but we do the 5-day SMSTS. We see that as equivalent to our 4-day supervisor course, but that's the health and safety element. It's not an NVQ, and so you would need to do a separate NVQ in relation to the supervision.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last one on the chat before we go to the Q&A questions. If we got an employee at manager level an AQP card with their construction degree, and also the employee had an SMSTS, would that not cover them on site as a manager?
Well, the degree shows that they are academically qualified in whatever degree field that they have completed. The SMSTS is training. It's not a qualification. It's evidence of training, that they've had training on health and safety. And yeah, and that's probably the key point, actually, that they've had training on health and safety as a supervisor. It's not training as a supervisor as such. So I don't think that would work.
Okay, thank you.
And moving to the chat then, where can we find more specific detail on what alternative qualifications are acceptable? So I think, as you said, John, we're probably trying to put that up somewhere along the line.
Yeah, well, I think there's the key ones. I think that might have been a double question type thing, but yeah, the obvious ones that I've talked through the qualifications, and that's all listed on our website at the minute. But if there are any other ones, certainly give us a shout and we'll look at it.
Okay, one person asked about the preventing suicide video. So just to let everybody know that we will have a link available for that as well. And we've SSTS help towards the qualifications for CSR, and do these serve in ROI and UK? So we've said those are specific qualifications. They're not affiliated to CSR. Make sure I'm right with this, Jonathan, before I move on to the next one.
Well, yeah, the SMSTS, we will accept that instead of our 4-day supervisor course, but it's the health and safety element. It's not a competence qualification. And in relation to whether it's accepted down south, I would be fairly certain that it's not, but I can't, fully comment on down south because it's not my jurisdiction, but I would check with Solus, but I think no.
Okay, thank you.
Is there support available to help business assess who needs what? As an example, we have around 100 employees that the changes are applicable to in varying roles.
I'm just looking, Wendy, we've answered that one. That's
Yeah,
I think that one's done, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the next one, the QS.
Yeah.
There, we've done that one too.
Hopefully we've done them all.
We're nearly there. Appeals process. You briefly mentioned the appeals process to assist people who have completed qualifications in the past but don't have certificates to prove it. How will this work? We've done that too, basically, haven't we?
Yeah, that's been covered.
Yeah.
Do the MVQs have to be completed by implementation date, or will enrolment suffice? I know this was mentioned, but John, could you please just clarify that again?
Yeah, so basically if you haven't completed an NVQ by the end, like the end of December 2024, and you don't have a qualification, your card will have been short dated to that date. So but if you have registered on an NVQ, we have experienced worker cards, experienced supervisor and experienced manager cards, and they are obviously dependent on the NVQ that you have registered for. You'll get the card, and then once you complete the NVQ, you can upgrade it to like the full card rather than the experienced one. But as I said in the presentation, it's a one-time only. If you haven't completed the qualification by the time you have your card expires, then you can't renew that because you don't have the qualification.
Yeah. Just a couple of thank yous as well. Thank you for a very informative session this morning. Unfortunately, need to leave and attend. Great questions and well answered. Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, it's been a long session, so there's plenty of questions and a lot of information. As I say, Jonathan's phone is available. Contact numbers, just ring the CEF.
Yeah, that'll do for the start. I'm not sure I'm going to get.
I think you're going to be you're going to be inundated with questions, John. But listen, I think we're all in the same position because we do have. I think you just have to look at every individual person and see what they have, assess them against the criteria, and try and see what the best route forward is for them. And if we do have any queries, just take them to Jonathan and the guys in the CEF.
I think the main thing is as well, and you did mention this, there is a time period. Start looking immediately and don't leave it till the last, because obviously there is going to be a difficulty later on if businesses do that. And probably, Jonathan, to be fair, the people that are on here today are the people that want to do the thing right. And there's going to be a vast amount of people out there who still have no understanding of any of these changes. So it's all about sharing news and dealing with supply chains and assisting supply chains.
Yeah, like I think I didn't quite catch that last little bit there, but I think basically I just want to echo, like this is a call to action if you're not already looking at it, which I assume most people on this call probably have at least started looking at it, but do start to look at it. One question that might get asked about the availability of assessors and that sort of stuff. There probably isn't enough assessors, if I'm brutally honest, and so get in quick is what I would say. What I would say in relation to that is that I think probably, to be fair to the NVQ providers, they are very reticent of moving on providing qualifications if employers aren't moving and sending their employees to them. So I think as that flow starts, then the providers will start to provide more, and with that certainty of flow type things. So get to it. Really.
And like you say, John, like, you know, once they have the health and safety training done to renew their card, there is that, you know, timeline that you can go back and revisit it again once they have the experience closed out and they have the MVQ. So there's nothing to stop them getting back on the site once they've done the 1-day course, but it's just that MVQ in the back of it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I suppose that's one of the other things we definitely don't want to stop someone from getting a card. And it might not be the most acceptable card for them, but they can certainly meet the health and safety requirements by doing the health and safety trained. But, you know, I think as an industry, you know, in England, the industry is, you know, moved towards NVQs probably 10 years ago, and have much more people that have that kind of recognition of their skills. And there's definitely the move towards a fully qualified workforce. And so Northern Ireland, you know, we don't want to fall behind that. I appreciate that it's a different industry and a different ball game and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, it is about trying to improve standards and things like that as well.
Yeah, and as well, trying to get our head around just for clients as well, just making sure that they understand the different types of cards that is there and what they actually represent.
Yeah, it's something that it's maybe an action for us to kind of try and educate clients. You know, we like CEF sit on various bodies with the clients and stuff, and it might be something that I can regurgitate a presentation to kind of just give a bit of, but obviously then that they need to roll it out to the guys on the ground and stuff. And you know, I think everyone's finding their feet to a certain extent. Yeah.
For sure. Jonathan, thank you very much. It's been very informative, and thanks for taking the time to do that for us.
No worries at all. I think I'll go and sit in a darkened room for a little while.
Darkened room.
I definitely think you need to.
Yeah, indeed. It's useful for people.
Yeah, and listen, again, as we said earlier, Ernie will have the webinar uploaded. It'll take probably longer to download than most webinars, to be fair, because it'll take a couple of hours to even go through to see what we've been talking about and getting it all put together. But that will be available in the next couple of days, and on the website on the members portal. And if you're not a member, contact Nicola, admin at NISG, and we'll be able to get you access to that then going forward. So thanks again, Jonathan.
Sorry for interrupting. Just one last thing. We will. I think Ernie has agreed that CEF will share the webinar as well, so you can get it. Once we have it, we'll put it up on the website. I think, being very forward-thinking, CEF now has a YouTube channel, so I would imagine it potentially might go on that. But yeah, we'll put information on the website as to how you can get it.
No problem. That's great. Thank you, folks.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Jonathan.
much indeed. Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.